Welcome to Most Mysterious Missing. Today we'll be looking at a mysterious death of a man who worked for MI6 and was found deceased, naked, inside a bag which was locked. He was found at his flat in London, and the mystery deepened when detectives realised that his bag that he was found in was locked with a padlock from the outside. Gareth Williams was aged 31 when he was found dead. He worked for MI6. He seemed to be involved in top secret work with MI6, and two senior British police staff members said that he was actually involved with trying to trace Moscow-based mafia cells. And his job, therefore, was to investigate money laundering that was going on in Russia. Gareth Williams was originally from North Wales. He spoke Welsh as a first language, and he was a gifted student, especially gifted with mathematics. He graduated with a first-class degree at age just 17. It was reported that he was a very private man and was a very keen cyclist and liked to keep fit with his cycling and hiking. His colleagues at work noticed that he had been out of contact for several days, and it was then that they called the police, and the police called round to his flat to do a welfare check. This was during the afternoon when they knocked on his door, 23rd of August 2010. When detectives finally got into his flat at Pimlico in London, they were met with quite a normal scene. Everything looked tidy. He was quite a tidy man. Everything seemed to be in place in the lounge. Pimlico is an upscale residential area in London. It has quiet streets lined with stately 19th century homes. It has many hotels and is close to the Tate Britain Gallery and stylish Chelsea, and this makes it popular with travellers, while post-work crowds frequent the chic restaurants and old-school pubs by busy Vauxhall Bridge Road. It was when they entered the bathroom that they were met with an awful smell. Unfortunately, his naked, decomposing remains were found inside his bath. Inside, a red bag that was padlocked from the outside, and the keys were inside the bag with him. DNA from two other individuals were found on the bag, but this wasn't investigated properly, it was said. A forensic examination of his flat, which was a security service safe house, concluded that there was no sign of forced entry and no sign of DNA that pointed to a third party present at the time of his death. But this doesn't seem to make sense, as two sets of DNA from two other persons were found on the bag. Does this mean there was some sort of cover-up going on? There was no evidence of Gareth's own fingerprints on the padlock of the bag, so does this mean that someone else must have padlocked him in? The key to the locked padlock was found inside the bag underneath his body. Detectives found a semen stain on the bathroom floor, and this led them to suspect that Mr. Williams was involved in sexual activity shortly before his death, which is believed to have occurred on August the 16th, 2010. It was estimated that Gareth Williams had died around 1 week before he was found. And after launching an investigation, the coroner said that there were no injuries on his body and no signs that he had been involved in a struggle. He had no alcohol in his systems and no drugs. At first, the Metropolitan Police considered that his death was suspicious and unexplained. However, a reinvestigation was carried out, and looking at all the evidence and the investigation of new leads, no definitive answers had been obtained as to the cause of his death. And the most probable scenario, they say, was that he died alone in his flat as the result of accidentally locking himself inside the bag. But is this really possible? Could he really have locked himself inside the bag and then died inside? But he didn't have his fingerprints on the padlock. It was later said that after studying his laptop, it emerged that he had been visiting some bondage websites. Although these visits were sporadic and isolated, and only accounted for a small proportion of the time he spent online. Inside his wardrobe, there were £20,000 worth of high-end women's clothing, and the clothing was around his size and would have fit him. A wig was also found on the chair in the lounge. So might this give weight to the fact that they believe he locked himself inside the bag? On his phone, they found a video of him naked wearing just leather boots, and they found 26 pairs of ladies' shoes in his wardrobe and makeup. Before moving to London, Gareth lived in Cheltenham, and his former landlady said that she and her husband had found him one day shouting for help. His hands were tied to his bedposts, and this was 3 years before his death. He told his landlady at the time that he was trying to see if he could get free, and so she and her husband cut him free, and they believed it was a sexual thing rather than anything else. Strangely, the heating in his flat was turned up to the highest heating level, and it is said that the heat in the flat would have led to his body decomposing much quicker. Subsequently, the police released an e-fit photo of 2 people they were seeking who were seen to enter the communal entrance of his home in June or July 2010. Expert investigator Peter Faulding had a theory that there was no way Gareth Williams could have locked himself inside that bag. So he bought a bag exactly the same size and make and videoed himself trying to lock himself inside the bag. He tried a total of 300 times and could not lock himself inside that bag. Surely this must show that there's no way Gareth could have locked himself inside that bag. Someone else must have been involved. But why had there been no signs of break-in at the flat? When Peter Faulding investigated, he saw that the front door had been locked from the outside, which he found highly suspicious. In my view, what was also suspicious was that it took several days for colleagues to call the police, even though he hadn't been showing up to work for several days. Did they not have a duty of care to protect him? Peter Faulding had analysed the oxygen levels inside the bag once it had been shut, and he suggested that Gareth Williams would have survived no longer than 30 minutes inside the bag due to such low levels of oxygen. It was later said that Gareth enjoyed going to drag shows in London on his own. One witness said they had chatted to him at a gay bar earlier on in the year, but police were unable to trace any sexual partners. Between May 2009 and the time he disappeared. He had visited 5 separate bondage websites on 4 occasions, but these were how-to sites rather than pornographic websites. It was also revealed that he had attended 2 courses in fashion design for beginners, and the Metropolitan Police were actively pursuing the sexual deviancy line. But was he doing this as a red herring? Was it Gareth's undercover work, maybe, that was requiring him to pose as a woman? We may never know the answer to this, due to the fact that his MI6 work was highly secretive. The family believed that Gareth was murdered. They were frustrated by the continual focus on his private life. They believed someone was in the flat with him or had broken in afterwards and stolen items. But detectives believed that Gareth was involved in some deadly sex game gone wrong by himself in the bathroom. 2 years later, a former KGB agent who had defected from Russia gave an interview in which he claimed that Russian agents had killed Gareth. They had tried and failed to blackmail him into becoming a double agent. Gareth had countered their threats, he said, by threatening to expose the identity of a Russian agent in GCHQ. So what really happened to Gareth Williams that day? Was it an accident? Did he accidentally lock himself inside that bag, hoping that he'd be able to set himself free? Or could it have been an accident and someone else was there? Was it a sex game gone wrong between the 2 people? Might have his oxygen levels have depleted unknowingly by the other person that was with him, and they just fled the scene? Or was it murder? Was Russia involved? After all, he was working for MI6. There was plenty of CCTV footage of Gareth, according to detectives, but all it showed was that he wasn't being followed by anybody. It didn't really show much else. So, due to the fact that his former landlady said that she and her husband had to set him free when he'd padlocked himself to his own bed frame, he's obviously interested in this sort of sexual activity. So, I think sexual activity was involved, and I believe that someone else was there with him in that flat. And it must have been a consensual thing. They locked him inside that bag consensually by the 2 of them, and unknowingly the oxygen levels depleted, and this led to Gareth's demise, and the other person then fled the scene. This is, of course, just my theory, and the reason I believe this is because his front door had been locked from the outside. There was no sign of break-in, and so I think he let someone in voluntarily. There is, of course, concern with regards to the time it took for his colleagues and bosses to report his disappearance. Dr. Wilcox voiced concerns about why it took so long for his disappearance to be reported, and she says that the evidence given by Gareth's line manager at GCHQ begins to stretch the bounds of credibility, and that the delay could have caused key evidence at the scene to be lost. Robin Williams, the family solicitor, said that Gareth's employers failed to make even the most basic inquiries about his whereabouts and welfare. So what do you think happened? Be sure to leave your comments below. May we never forget the strange and mysterious death of Gareth Williams.